Love doesn't die suddenly, it fades in silence. That's what Ethan Ward kept telling himself every night he came home to a half-lit apartment, the sound of the city humming outside their window. Once, the space he shared with Daniel Rivers had felt alive, warm with laughter, scented with burnt coffee and shared breakfasts. Now, it was tidy in the way abandoned rooms often are. Everything in its place, except for them. Daniel was still the same in many ways, meticulous, ambitious, and impossibly composed. But lately, his smile arrived late and left early. He was always on his phone, always somewhere else, and Ethan had stopped asking where else was. Their conversations had thinned into polite exchanges. Did you eat? Yes. Are you home late again? Probably. Small talk that used to fill the silence now merely marked its depth. Ethan tried to keep up the routines that once held them together. He still cooked dinner at 7, still poured 2 glasses of red wine, though one always remained untouched. When Daniel came home, it was usually after 10. His tie was loosened, his eyes tired. He'd murmur, "You didn't have to wait up," as if the gesture were unnecessary rather than lonely. Ethan would smile anyway, say, "It's fine," and pretend that fine was enough. Their bed had become a geography of distance. Ethan slept near the edge, Daniel toward the center, as though there were continents between them. On nights when sleep refused to come, Ethan would stare at the ceiling and wonder when love had turned into maintenance, when affection had become something he had to remember rather than something he felt. That it wasn't that Daniel didn't care. He did, in the same careful, practical way he did everything. He reminded Ethan to pay bills, to lock the door, to take an umbrella if it looked like rain. But somewhere along the way, the tenderness had dissolved into routine. They weren't fighting, but they weren't connecting either. It was the kind of quiet decay no one warns you about, the slow unraveling of something that once seemed unbreakable. One Friday evening, after another cancelled dinner plan, Ethan sat alone at the table, staring at the clock. Daniel had texted, "Meeting ran late. Don't wait up." The message felt clinical, almost automated. Ethan looked at the untouched plate across from him and felt an ache that was both sharp and dull, a hunger not for food, but for presence. That he left the apartment without knowing where he was going. The night air was cold, biting, but it kept him awake. He walked through the streets until he reached a small cafe tucked between 2 bookstores, a place he hadn't noticed before. Inside, warm light spilled across wooden tables, and the scent of espresso cut through the rain-soaked air. He ordered a coffee, sat near the window, and tried to quiet the noise inside his chest. That's when he heard a familiar voice. "Ethan? Is that really you?" He looked up, startled, and saw Noah Clark, a friend he hadn't seen in years. Noah was exactly as he remembered, expressive eyes, an easy smile, the kind of presence that made a room feel lighter. They had met in college, once close, then lost touch as life moved on. Ethan's surprise melted into a smile. "Noah. Wow, it's been forever." They fell into conversation effortlessly. What started as polite catching up turned into laughter, small jokes, shared memories. Noah listened, really listened, the way Daniel hadn't in months. He asked about Ethan's work, his art, his life, and when Ethan hesitated, Noah noticed. "You okay?" he asked softly, not prying, just present. Ethan wanted to say everything, that he was tired of waiting for someone who was already gone, that he missed being seen. But he just nodded. "Yeah. Just, long week." They talked until the cafe began to close. Noah offered to walk him home, but Ethan declined gently, promising they'd meet again soon. As he stepped back into the cold night, he realized his chest felt both lighter and heavier. When he returned to the apartment, Daniel was asleep on the couch, one hand resting on his phone, screen still lit with unread emails. The television played quietly, forgotten. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching him. He still loved Daniel, at least the memory of him, but it felt like loving a photograph, something fixed in time, unreachable. He turned off the TV, covered Daniel with a blanket, and whispered, "I miss you." Daniel didn't stir. Ethan lay in bed that night, eyes open, heart heavy. The quiet pressed against him like a weight, but beneath it was a flicker, an echo of warmth from a smile in a cafe, from a voice that asked if he was okay and seemed to mean it. As the city slept, Ethan realized something he couldn't ignore. He was lonelier beside Daniel than he had ever been alone. The following week unfolded with a quiet predictability. Daniel's hours at the office stretched longer, and Ethan filled the time with tasks that gave his hands purpose but left his mind restless. He trimmed hedges already neat, rearranged books on shelves, and brewed coffee he barely tasted. Yet, between each routine, his thoughts wandered next door. Liam, the name lingered like a tune caught in memory. One afternoon, as Ethan returned from a short walk, he found Liam crouched beside his front steps, coaxing a stubborn lock into place with a screwdriver. Sweat beaded along his temple, his shirt clinging slightly to his back. "Need a hand?" Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. Liam looked up, grin flashing. "Only if you know something about ancient door locks. This thing's seen better decades." Ethan knelt beside him, the faint scent of metal and pine filling the space between them. Together, they twisted and tightened until the bolt finally clicked into place. "Victory," Liam said, laughing softly. "Coffee to celebrate?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, I could use one." Inside Liam's house, boxes were half open, clothes draped over chairs, books scattered on the floor. It was lived-in chaos, a sharp contrast to Ethan's orderly home. Yet, it felt warm, real. The air carried the faint smell of cedar and roasted beans. Liam handed him a cup. "No sugar, right? You seem like the no-sugar type." Ethan smiled, surprised. "Lucky guess." "Not luck," Liam said, settling into a chair. Observation. Their conversation meandered easily, from music to travel to small-town oddities. Liam spoke with the kind of openness that invited trust. He had a way of looking directly at someone, not through them. Ethan found himself talking more than usual, about Daniel's long hours, his own design work, the way time had started to feel heavy lately. "You ever feel," Ethan said slowly, "like you're living a life you didn't choose but can't step out of?" Liam tilted his head. "Every day, before I moved here." Their eyes met for a heartbeat too long, and Ethan felt something stir, an awareness that frightened him as much as it thrilled. A phone buzzed on the table. Ethan glanced down. "Daniel, hey," he said, answering. "Yeah, I'll pick up the dry cleaning. Don't worry." His voice softened automatically, shaped by habit. When he hung up, the spell broke, but not completely. "Your husband?" Liam asked gently. Ethan nodded. "Always working." "Seems like you are, too," Liam said. "Working to keep everything together." Ethan didn't answer. He just stared into his coffee, the dark surface trembling slightly. The afternoon faded into gold. When Ethan finally stood to leave, Liam followed him to the door. "You should come by again," he said, almost an afterthought. "I make better coffee once I unpack the rest." Ethan smiled. "Maybe I will." And he did. Over the next week, their paths crossed naturally, at the mailbox, the garden fence, the local cafe. Each encounter stretched a little longer. Liam's humor disarmed him, his warmth filled the spaces Daniel no longer noticed. Conversations grew more personal. Ethan learned that Liam painted in the evenings, that he'd left a long-term relationship that had stopped feeling like home. Ethan didn't ask for details, but he understood the ache behind those words. One evening, as gray clouds gathered above, rain began to pour suddenly and without mercy. Ethan, caught outside between their houses, dashed toward Liam's porch for shelter. "You again," Liam said, laughing, holding the door open. "Come in before you drown." Inside, they stood dripping on the hardwood floor. Liam tossed Ethan a towel, their fingers brushing. A tiny shock of contact passed between them. "You're soaked," Liam said, stepping closer to help dry the back of Ethan's neck. His hand lingered, warm, steady. Ethan's breath caught. The air between them felt charged, fragile. He turned slightly, meeting Liam's gaze. For a moment, neither moved. The rain outside was loud enough to make silence intimate. Then Ethan stepped back, forcing a smile. "Thanks. I should go before Daniel gets home." Liam's voice softened. "Of course." Ethan left quickly, rain soaking his shoes as he crossed the driveway. He didn't look back, but he felt Liam's eyes following him through the downpour. That night, Ethan lay beside Daniel, who had already fallen asleep. The sound of rain still echoed in his mind, mingling with the ghost of Liam's touch. He stared at the ceiling, heartbeat restless. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something dangerous, desire not for what he didn't have, but for what he wasn't supposed to want. He turned toward Daniel, watching his peaceful sleep, and whispered a lie to himself. "It's nothing. Just curiosity." But curiosity had a pulse now, and it refused to quiet. Morning light crept across the room, pale and unforgiving. Ethan woke to the soft hum of rain against the window, Noah's steady breathing beside him. For a moment, he didn't move. The world felt suspended, quiet, still, fragile. Then reality began to return, slow and heavy. His clothes lay folded on the chair, his phone flashing unread messages. The clock ticked louder than usual, marking every second of what he had just undone. Noah stirred, blinking awake. "You okay?" he murmured, voice hoarse with sleep. Ethan forced a nod. "Yeah," he lied. But the guilt was already pressing down on his chest, thick and suffocating. He stood, dressing in silence. Noah didn't stop him, he only watched, as though understanding that words would do more harm than good. Before leaving, Ethan paused at the door. "I shouldn't have, I know," Noah said softly. "But I don't regret seeing you." Ethan managed a faint, broken smile. "That's the problem." Outside, the streets were slick with rain. Each drop seemed to echo against the pavement, amplifying his thoughts. He walked without direction, the city blurring around him. Every step felt like a confession. When he reached his apartment, Daniel's coat was still hanging by the door, just as he'd left it. The sight of it made Ethan's throat tighten. He went to the kitchen, made coffee out of habit, but couldn't bring himself to drink it. The smell reminded him of every morning that used to feel like routine, safe, predictable, whole. Now, the simplicity of it felt almost cruel. By evening, Daniel returned. He looked tired, distant, unaware of the storm waiting behind Ethan's calm expression. "You're quiet," Daniel said, setting down his bag. "Just tired," Ethan replied. Daniel studied him for a long moment. "You've been different lately." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Different how?" "Like you're somewhere else," Daniel said. "Even when you're here, it's like, you're not." Ethan wanted to deny it, to rebuild the fragile illusion they'd been living in. But his silence betrayed him. The truth hung between them, silent, undeniable. Daniel's expression changed. He didn't need confirmation, he already knew. "There's someone else," he said quietly, the words landed with the finality of a door closing. Ethan's breath caught. "Daniel, don't," Daniel interrupted. His voice was calm, but the hurt in his eyes was raw, exposed. "Please don't tell me it didn't mean anything. That's always what people say when it means everything." Ethan's eyes burned. "I didn't plan it. I felt invisible." Daniel looked away, jaw tightening. "And he made you feel seen." The room felt too small, too bright. Ethan reached for him, but Daniel stepped back. "You could have told me," he whispered. "You could have told me before it got this far." "I tried," Ethan said, voice breaking. "You stopped hearing me a long time ago." Daniel's silence said what his words couldn't. He turned toward the door, pausing only once. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said softly. "But I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for." When the door closed, the apartment fell into stillness. Ethan sank to the floor, the echo of Daniel's words looping through his mind. The guilt was sharp, but beneath it was something quieter, clarity. What hurt most wasn't the loss, but the realization that it had been ending long before he crossed that line. Later, he tried calling Noah. The line rang twice before Noah answered. His voice was cautious. "Ethan." "I told him," Ethan said. A pause. Then Noah exhaled, heavy. "How did he take it?" "He left." "I'm sorry." Ethan closed his eyes. "I don't even know what I wanted from this." "Maybe," Noah said gently, "you wanted to feel alive again." The words settled between them, tender and sad. "Maybe," Ethan whispered. "But it came at a cost." Noah didn't argue. "Take care of yourself, Ethan." That was the last thing he said before hanging up. Days passed quietly. Daniel didn't return, and Noah didn't call again. The silence that once suffocated Ethan now felt deserved. He began spending his evenings at the cafe where he'd first seen Noah again. He'd sit by the window, a notebook open, writing thoughts he couldn't say aloud. One morning, he wrote, "I slept beside my friend and realized I was losing myself." He stared at the words for a long time. They weren't an excuse, they were a truth. Infidelity hadn't been a rebellion or a thrill, it had been a reflection of his own emptiness. He hadn't betrayed Daniel to find love. He had done it because he couldn't stand the person he had become inside that silence. As he stepped out of the cafe, the city was washed clean by rain. The air was cold, but his chest felt lighter. Maybe, he thought, losing yourself is the only way to learn who you really are, and for the first time in months, Ethan didn't look back.